Okay.
and welcome to In Their Own League. I'm Joan Amon, and today I am so excited to have with us Brian Skutle. Brian, thank you for being with us today. This is the team up I've long looked forward to. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do when you're not writing for In Their Own League?
So my main website is Sonic Cinema, www.sonic-cinema.com. There you can find the vast majority of my movie reviews, my print reviews, as well as the Sonic Cinema podcast, um, fan commentaries that some friends of mine did years and years ago before we started the podcast, and then some of my original music. And one of the things that I did very early on in college is I started composing music, and it's very cinematically inspired. If you've listened to it over the years, it's available plenty of places. The main place is Bandcamp. You can find all my albums as well as my two EPs that I've released there, and it's very much inspired by film soundtracks, ideas in films, just ideas and soundtracks that I was inspired by at the time that I composed these pieces. And yeah, I mean that's the main thing. And then the Sonic Cinema podcast, it's just a lot of movie discussions, a lot of different discussions. I don't really limit myself to a specific type of discussion over there. We talk about all sorts of things. We just released an episode where we talked about a couple of specials based on the character Lupin the Third for anime. We talked about Jack Ryan films earlier this summer. We've talked about all sorts of movies, and no, it's always a pleasure to be able to contribute to In Their Own League, and I'm really looking forward to this discussion today.
Thank you. And we just want to say that Brian composed our opening music for this episode and all of our YouTube episodes. So thank you, Brian. Brilliant. Love it. One of the most beautiful things. I was so delighted to have you do that. So let's jump in. Today we're discussing The River Wild with Meryl Streep, which feeds into our theme for this month, which is Aquatic Artist, and wonderful. So Meryl Streep is incredible and still going strong even to this day. She's up for an Emmy this year for her work in Only Murders in the Building. So she is just a powerhouse. But in this film, she shows a unique side of her that we don't usually see. So I'm kind of excited to talk
Mhm.
about this film with you today. Let's talk about basically, for people who are not familiar, it's been a while since this film came out. Let's just give a little overview of what the film's about. It's a family vacation. We've got mom, her son. They're going to go ride the water rapids. She has some experience as a white water rafter, and they're going to go out there, and she's going to show the kid what it's like to ride. I believe it was supposed to be the Snake River, which
Mhm.
is in Montana. So her husband and she are having a few difficulties to iron out. Uh, David Strahan, absolutely wonderful actor. It has a fantastic cast. This film has an incredible cast.
Yes. Yes,
Uh,
it does.
it's like, wow, where the heck have they got all these people? So we've got David Strahan, we've got Meryl Streep, we've got Kevin Bacon, we've got John C. Riley, and we cannot not mention John Mazzello, who at the time was a child, Joseph Mazzello, who was at the time was a child, but he was having a streak of hits for himself there with
Mhm.
Jurassic Park and then this film. So this was an incredible cast for this film. And in overall, it seemed kind of like when you first, at first blush, it seemed kind of an innocuous like family film. Oh wow, let's go on a family trip, and go on a family vacation. What could possibly go wrong? And it quickly becomes a thriller, which I don't know, even with the film posters gave us an idea what this film was really going to entail. I remember the posters of just Meryl in a raft with her family, and maybe you don't quite get the idea that this is going to be a little more intense
Yeah.
just going down the Snake River. I said that wasn't intense enough. So
Hmm.
it's kind of like, all right. Oh. And we have to talk about the river itself. The river itself being, in the best tradition of David Lean, almost a character unto itself because it's pretty rough.
Hmm.
It's pretty rough. It's
Absolutely.
pretty scary. It becomes almost like one of those, like Bruce the Shark. It becomes this threatening plot device for the entire cast.
Hmm.
And it was great how they did that. I mean, they really did justice to whitewater rafting not being a casual thing. Have you ever been whitewater rafting?
Many times actually. So I was in Boy Scouts growing up, and I was 17 when this movie came out. And so I had already gotten my Eagle Scout. I had been in Scouts since we moved down in 88, 89. And we did a lot of whitewater rafting trips. Mostly local, Nahala, Chattooga, all of those rivers, a lot in North Georgia, Tennessee, and I really loved it. I loved the experience. It was exciting, and it felt the way we were approaching it. We never hit anything quite as bad as the gauntlet at the end of this movie, of course, but it felt like a in a way it felt like a safe way to sort of risk our lives and go on adventures in a very somewhat controlled but out of control manner. So I mean that's part of the reason why the River Wild appealed to me when it came out. And I know my mom and I saw it together when it came out in 94, so it's gonna be 30 years this year. And the whitewater rafting aspect was a big part of it for me. I was one of the things I really earlier in the summer I just started to really start to shift in terms of how I started to look at films. Like this is it's interesting that this movie happened to come out in the same year where I really just started to transform my ideas of what I wanted in films and what interested me in films. And um so I think this was, I don't know if it was exactly the first film with her that I had seen, but it was definitely the first time I really paid attention to Meryl Streep as an actress. And
Interesting.
it's interesting because of the fact that it's an adventure film.
Yeah.
Very much outside of her wheelhouse now that I've seen a good portion of what she's done on both sides of this film. And I know one of the appeals to my mom was she's a tough, badass female character. And that's definitely one of the things that I think is interesting. And we can't talk about this film without talking about the director, the late great Curtis Hanson. And it's funny because they collaborated again a bit later, but in front of the screen because Curtis Hanson plays Meryl Streep's husband in Adaptation.
Mm, mm,
So
mm.
he's in like one or two scenes in that movie. So it's interesting to see them collaborate again. But Curtis Hanson, and you talk about this movie essentially being an adventure thriller, you know, and you talked about the supporting cast. And it's like, do you remember when action movies were more than just the $20 million star at the center of it?
Honestly, this was just a fantastic ensemble cast. We really need to speak about that. I mean, Trayvon, oh my goodness. I mean, I love everything he's in. He cannot possibly be bad. David Trayvon cannot possibly be bad in
Yeah.
anything. I mean, even if he's, to my opinion, underutilized here, he's
Hmm.
incredible. It's incredible. Oh my goodness. John C. Riley, I gotta tell you, to me, he's a little shall we say a fish out of water here? Because I see him in anything but a comedy role. I mean, that's me. That's just my perception of him. I see him in, Chicago
Yeah.
being this comedic
Yeah.
loser. I see him in Ricky Bobby. I'm sorry, until I go. Sorry. But but here he's a great support to Kevin Bacon, who for a while
Yes.
there could not break out of being typecast as the bad guy.
Hmm.
And that man
Yeah.
had a run being bad guy roles.
Well, and this was, and you have to remember, this was also around the time 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon started, right?
Yes.
So once again, this is another one of those, oh, well, Kevin Bacon's in it. So A, it's gonna be good. B, you're gonna be able to tie so many more actors into it. I agree with you about Stray there, and he's fantastic in this film. I don't know, and the thing is, I don't know if I would necessarily agree. I agree because of his talent. He's probably underutilized, but I think for the role he's playing, it's just right. He's basically playing a husband who is not very attentive of not just his wife but his family. He's basically a workaholic. He's that stereotypical husband who just really for the to the detriment of his family throws himself into his work. And so when he eventually comes on the right white rafting trips, he brings his work with him. And so it's like his mind is elsewhere. um so I do think it's kind of interesting the way they have Kevin Bacon in this movie. I mean, he's going to play a big part in the role, obviously, because he was one of the main focuses. His name was on the poster, but also by this point in his career, you knew what Kevin Bacon brought to a film. And when he first see him with Joseph Mazzello, they connect on because he's got the Lollapalooza hat and stuff like that, as if this movie could not be more 90s. It's so you have that connection where it's like, oh, Kevin Bacon is gonna be sort of he's gonna sort of use his charm to encroach uh on the family. And
Mm-hmm.
even with Strathairn's character there. And yeah, I mean, John C. Riley, I mean, he's always been somebody where I agree with you. I agree with you. It's very hard not to see him in a comedic sense. It's very hard to see him as a straight dramatic actor. I mean, I think one of the most significant examples of that is Magnolia, where he's a serious actor. For the most part, he's got a lot of humor that comes with the character. And it's and you mentioned in the but the thing is, when we talk about the cast, I love the moments when Benjamin Bratt is in here
Oh, he's so
as
good.
as the guide who they come upon a couple of key moments.
Uh-huh.
I love the actors who play Gail's parents. They
Yes.
make an impression at the beginning of the movie. And it's just really, this is one of those, this is what I it's weird, and we can talk about it a little bit later. I miss this era of action adventure movies when it was something different than just shoot 'em up, cops and robbers, all that stuff. It was about bringing a bringing an adventure setting to something different. And it was funny rewatching this in preparation for this episode. It sort of reminded me of the original Twister in a way,
Hmm.
and
Interesting.
because of the way the river is structured, and you talked about the river being a character, it completely is. The way that the river gets more and more difficult to navigate is
Yes.
very much that's why it reminded me of Twister, because each set piece is trickier and trickier and trickier. And it's not so much about man against man or woman against man, as the case may be. It's about man versus nature. And I
Hmm.
love that in this movie. That's one of the things that is so exciting, I think, about this movie to watch even now.
You know, you're absolutely right. I mean, thrillers at that era were more involved in slowly evolving. They slowly
Mm-hmm.
drew you in, and this film is great for that. It slowly ratchets up the tension, and of course, the river represents that. The river represents that slowly ratcheting up of, oh my goodness, what are they going to go through now? In addition to Kevin Bacon being so brilliant and playing a psychopath that slowly evolves into showing his
Mm-hmm.
true colors. So you've got these dual tension building devices going on. You've got him playing his psychopath that he does so well, and he's slowly revealing that. And then you've got this river slowly becoming more and more hazardous. And you know, there's layers, right? There's a nuance whether we don't have that necessarily now in films today, where it's like quickly cut to the chase, and then it loses something when you already know it's so set up so obviously, and you don't really get that tension building. And this is done so well, and a lot of it is really Meryl, I think, showing what she's capable of. It's also the development of her character, isn't it? And that she's
Mm-hmm.
meeting these challenges one by one, you know, and what's set before her, and you see her evolving and becoming stronger or struggling, you know, to
Yeah.
overcome what she's facing. And that's just it's a whole metaphor for her character, which is just so brilliant and how it's
Mm-hmm.
set up. I have to say though, Joseph Mazzello, that poor kid, you know, I made a note of it. It's just like the kid couldn't catch a break. He was nearly toast in Jurassic Park, and he nearly drowns in this one. And what was mom thinking bringing him on board, really?
Right.
But he was great. He was great in showing how eager he was in his character to look for a strong male figure in his life,
Mm-hmm.
which,
Mm-hmm.
of course, Kevin Bacon's character latches onto immediately in
Yeah.
as a manipulation. And the kid was great in showing that. Mazzillo was great in showing that. And also just, you know, the various shades of terror, but also trusting mom.
Yeah.
Okay, mom's gonna get us through this. That was just really, for a young
Mm-hmm.
person, he really nailed that. I thought that was really great maturity on his part to show the different nuance of a character that really could have been just kind of one note screaming the entire time, you know, but he really pulled it into something that was much more mature, much more
Mm-hmm.
adult, a little more nuanced. And I just was really respecting his talent that he could bring that to
Yeah.
really, he could have been totally overshadowed by adults here.
Oh yeah.
But you know,
No, I
yeah,
mean he definitely is. He's always been an actor who is very mature for his age. And I mean, I remember a movie that came out a few years after this that got really derided, and it's not a particularly good movie. Simon Birch, they was
mm,
in, and he was phenomenal in that movie. I loved him in that movie. But yeah, you're right. I mean, and this is a Universal picture, so naturally, chances are that Jurassic Park is a big part of the reason why I got this role. Um, but no, I do really like him the way he is capable of being a teenager, where he shows disrespect to his father because he just feels like his father doesn't really care about them. um he's not necessarily afraid to question his mother at times, but at the same time, to your point, he also trusts that his mother is going to look after him, especially as this situation escalates, not
right,
only on the river, but with Wade, the Kevin Bacon character.
right.
And no, it's a I love how this screenplay is very simple. And simple screenplays are very difficult to do with this type of escapism, because how much do you lean into cliches? How much, and what do, though, if you're leaning into certain degree of cliches when it comes to the story structure, how are you using that to build character? And I think that having a director like Hansen, who after this he did LA Confidential. He did Wonder Boys. Before this, he'd done The Hand That Rocks the Cradle. He did 8 Mile after this. He's a fantastic filmmaker. Um, he is somebody who really understood getting to the authenticity of the narrative. And I think for him, he got that the authenticity of this narrative is the dual tension of the river rafting along with the personal interactions as Wade gets deeper and deeper with this family.
I don't think you often see in a film the interactions between a mom and a son. It would be a mom and a daughter. But in this
Right.
film, you see a mom and a son. I loved that. I love that they kind of tweaked that to show that it was the son. It was because, like you say, it was the son who was able to say, I'm not really happy with how dad's treating us, but
Mm-hmm.
I'll latch on to Kevin Bacon as a male substitute for the dad I wish I had. And that dynamic works so well. It wouldn't work, I don't think, so much with the daughter, who in the film she does have a daughter,
Yeah.
who
Yeah.
we quickly see is left with grandma and grandpa.
Mm-hmm.
But that could have been flipped. That could have been like, okay, well, we'll make the daughter the preteen or the teen, and make the son, stay the younger one and stay with grandma and grandpa. But because, and I think that was really great with the script, that Hanson film set it up to be, okay, this is the dynamic between preteen teen son, the mom, and the semi-absentee dad, and make that
Yeah.
dynamic work, and how it works with these two strangers on the river who interrupt
Mm-hmm.
their lives and like kind of barge in. And that really was, like you say, it sounds really simple. It sounds
Yeah.
really simple script wise, but because we have these quality actors, they make it work so well.
Mm-hmm. No, and it would have been a completely different movie if it had been a daughter. It probably wouldn't have been as impactful of a movie because you do have that tension between the more or less absentee father with the surrogate father and Wade's character. And then you have the further dynamic that evolves with Strathern and Wade and Bacon's
Mhm.
character.
Mhm.
And I love the way that triangle, it's not even really about Gale to a certain extent. It's
Mhm.
about how come I can't remember uh Rourke. Rourke. That's how I can remember his name because it's an unusual name for a
It is.
character.
It was.
Um but the thing is, it's like it's one of those things where if that is it would be a very different it would be a completely different movie if it was a daughter. Like where's the familial tension in that case? Or I mean, obviously, the daughter is left behind because she's sick, but also she's probably too young for this river. I mean, Gail probably knows. It's like, no, this is gonna be too tough for you. Maybe in a few years we'll let you do some rafting. But the fact that you have those double layers of tension, and the fact that triangle is really with Gail on the outside of it is what makes it so compelling, that like she's the one who basically has to hold this together, and it's at a certain point go, look, if we're going to survive this, if everybody is going to survive this, regardless of how we feel about one another, we need to work together, because she understands nature, she understands the river. And that's where her character, being somebody who was, excuse me, her character being somebody who was probably a bit more adventurous. I mean, we get that a little bit in the dynamic with the Benjamin Bratt character, um, is important to this movie because of the fact that it means that she's not just a regular housewife who's looking after the kids, who's having a hard time in her marriage, she's somebody who can take care of herself. And that is such an important part of this. But because of how much she cares about her family, she knows she's got to keep the peace to a certain extent to make sure that her family gets out of this. And again, it's that simplicity of the screenplay, but finding that complexity in the narrative in a way that is we can empathize with, and we can understand where all of these tensions come into place.
No, and any other actress maybe would have been overshadowed by this triangle. But Meryl
Yeah.
is just so strong. And she just brings this authentic. I mean, you believe. And she did a lot of her own stunts too, which we need to speak of because that's just total madness. I mean, what? Who did that? You know, she is so commanding in this role. And it would have been so easy to be eclipsed by the whole triangle straight on bacon alone. My goodness. But she pulls it back to her focus about how she's going to get her family through this, like you say. And you see this dynamic evolving with Gayla and her husband, Tom. Okay, they have problems, they have issues. We see that throughout the film. But at the same time, she steps up and he has to recognize, now, this is her expertise right here. This river,
Yeah.
this is what Gail knows. Gail knows how to do this. And she says multiple times over to various people in the film, I know this river. I know this river. This is what we're going to do. I know this. And I think that was maybe one of the first times in her life where she can actually say, I know this. Take a seat in the back.
Yeah.
And I'm driving, And it's just amazing to me how, first of all, Streep's commitment. I mean, what? She actually did most, if not all, of her own stunts. This is crazy. This a river that was obviously dangerous. Even if a lot of it was made to look more dangerous than it was dangerous enough. And wow, I mean, she just was incredible to be able to do that, to say, all right, I'm going to play this role. And oh, by the way, yeah, I'm going to be, whitewater rafting too. And how do you have that confidence? I mean, I respect her so much. This woman actually is not known for physical roles. We know Meryl Streep's, overwork. She's not known for being an action adventure hero. And yet here she is taking this on and making it believable. And she's not particularly a young woman in this role. She's a mom of 2 kids in this role.
Yeah.
And yet she's still being an action adventure hero here. It's just remarkable.
And the thing is, it's like, unless you're doing like the lowest rated type of rapids, but I mean, even then, whitewater rafting is still a demanding thing to do. I mean, it really is. It's like, you've got to bring your A game to it, regardless of what you're doing, because you don't want to go overboard, and you certainly don't want to injure anybody else that may be in the raft with you. So, no, I mean, the thing I like about Streep here, and it's interesting because of the fact that, I mean, you mentioned in the outline a lot of her other 90s work. And one of the things that strikes me in looking at this run of movies from like the early 90s is how different they all are. I mean, it's not like the regal Meryl Streep type award, like automatic Academy Award winning stuff. Like Postcards from the Edge, Death Becomes Her, River Wild, Bridges of Madison County. I mean, that is such a varied collection of work in a wide variety of genres with very different filmmakers.
Yeah, she is fearless. I mean, and it should be mentioned, she was up for a Golden Globe for River Wild, which, I mean, totally understand that. Just getting in the raft. I mean, yeah. And I should know, I'm within walking distance to a river where I live here in Washington State, and I have never been whitewater rafting. For the very simple reason that I'm like Chief Brody in Jaws, I have this issue called drowning. Um, but every summer in real life here in Washington State, there's at least one person who needs to be rescued off of the river
Yeah,
where a river trip goes wrong. So this is not a casual undertaking here to whitewater raft in any means. But yeah, I mean, her body of work in the 90s was just stunning. What is going on? We have
mhm,
the bridges in Madison County, which was a phenomenon unto itself. I'm sure you remember.
yeah,
Uh, Death Becomes Her has become a cult classic, even at the time people were like, what was that?
yeah,
Postcards from the Edge. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Just astonishing, but so different. And then we have The River Wild. I mean, Meryl is just taking every opportunity and running with it. And it's just an astonishing choice. The choices she was making.
mhm.
Wow. You know, no fear, just threw herself into this.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing I like about all of these is that they're all mainstream movies. They're all major studio movies. They're all major like and major filmmakers too. Like Mike Nichols, Grant, she had worked with him back before in Silkwood, so they knew each other. Death Becomes Her, Zemeckis. River Wild's Curse Hanson. Bridges of Madison County's freaking Clint Eastwood, another icon. I had forgotten, like you mentioned here, I mean, she did get nominated for the Golden Globe. Her and Bacon, I forgot, both got nominated for Screen Actors Guild.
Yes.
And
Yes.
they're both terrific in this movie.
Yes.
I completely forgot. I wasn't surprised that Streep got nominated. I am a little surprised that Bacon got nominated. Like, it seems like the type of role where you could get easily forgotten because of the nature of who we kind of realized who Kevin Bacon was as an actor at this point. So the fact that they gave him a nomination for this movie, I'm glad to see it. I really am glad to see it. And he's always been one of, it's funny because as well known as he is, I also think he's a tremendously underrated actor because I don't think he's ever been nominated for an Oscar.
No, I don't believe so.
And that's insane because you think about all of the amazing movies he's been in,
No.
but it's like, how has he not been nominated for an Oscar? He's
Seriously, what is,
fantastic.
yeah, I mean, the man is tremendous. I mean, talk about range.
Yeah.
Seriously, he's another actor with like what kind of range? Holy moly. And truly, I mean, he deserved the nomination. I mean, he's terrifying in this film. He's
Yeah.
absolutely terrifying in this film. And yeah, no, I was actually, when I researched this, I was really gratified to see that he was nominated too, because wow, truly
Mhm.
incredible. But in this whole, when you look at Streep's body of work, when talking about this film in context, I don't know if this film is remembered so much today, except as wow, Meryl Streep made an action adventure film. Holy
Yeah.
moly, what was that?
Yeah.
Oh,
And it's a
uh,
shame.
yeah,
It's a shame because
yeah,
this really was not a huge hit at the time. And it's disappointing because of the fact that, I mean, this was the 90s, like the two biggest hits of 94 were Forrest Gump and The Lion King, like two completely different movies. But, I, part of the reason that always, 94 is one of my favorite years in movies. It really is. I mean, yes, you had The Crow, which everybody at this point knows that I love. You had Pulp Fiction, which it's funny because of the fact that when I first saw the trailer, I'm like, what is that? Why do I want to see that? I finally got to see it and I absolutely adored it. But you think about action movies this year, you've got Speed, you've got Blown Away, you've got Clear and Present Danger, you got The River Wild, you've got The Professional. Like, there's some really diverse groups of action movies here. And I can imagine, like, if this movie had been released, I feel like if this movie had been released now, it might have been a bigger hit. Or if it had been released after Twister, it might have been a bigger hit. Because by that point, again, Helen Hunt is the main character of that movie. And,
So would we have
it
had
was,
Hunt if we didn't have Streep, right? I mean, she kind of paved the
yeah,
way. Yeah,
yeah, exactly.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, no, I mean, I love this movie, and it is a shame that it doesn't really get remembered as much as it should. There was that sort of remake, reimagining, whatever you want to call it. It was essentially the same type of movie, just not as interesting. Um, like Meredith and I watched it, when it came out on Netflix, and it's like, yeah, I mean, it's okay. I mean, it's nothing I didn't see in the first one, and I think the first one did a lot better. But no, I mean, I love how different this feels from so many other action movies. Like, and it does. I really do think like it sort of paves the way for something like Twister
Mhm.
because of the fact that it's man versus nature, but in a very direct way. Where yes, you've got antagonists and stuff like that, and you've got like this story would not be as you'd be like, how is this story going to fit together if it didn't have the right water rafting angle? And I think that's where this movie just ends up working so well. And Hansen just understands how to build tension. He understands how to use cinematography, editing, music. We've got to talk about the Jerry Goldsmith score, which is
Oh, was that
fantastic
beautiful?
in this movie.
Even just the opening scene. Oh my
Yeah.
goodness. Oh, his score, even just her rowing peacefully in Boston. Oh my goodness.
Mhm.
I just that totally gorgeous, totally beautiful scene of her just rowing to his music. Could have watched that forever.
Yeah.
Which then leads to like something totally different in this film. He sets up this peaceful, tranquil scene, and then it's like, whoa, we get plunged in something completely different. But yeah, I mean, the score was absolutely gorgeous and
Yeah.
set the tone so well. But I mean, again, Jerry Goldsmith. I mean, what can we
Mhm.
expect? But yeah, I think you're right. I think 1994 was just such a year of hits that coming that maybe this got I don't want to say drowned out, pun intended, but washed away maybe. But yeah, I mean, it didn't register as
Right.
strongly. And honestly, I mean, in the 90s, Meryl was the hits kept coming from Meryl anyway. Her body of work was so strong. After a while, it's like, Meryl, could you please take a seat because we can't keep up with you because you just,
Yeah.
her body of work is just so, it keeps going and it still keeps going and going and going.
Mhm.
So at some point, it's like, okay, do we have Meryl's, greatest hits as well?
Right.
Uh,
Well,
yeah.
and at the end of this decade, she was nominated for an Oscar in a Wes Craven movie of all things. I mean, it's like now, granted, a very atypical Wes Craven movie, but still, it's like, what is this decade for her? Like, she's working with so many, it's she's working with so many varied filmmakers and who are known for such wildly different things that but no, I she's fantastic in this movie. I absolutely love her in this movie, and it makes me. I mean, I don't know that we've necessarily wanted to see her in like a few more action movies. I mean, obviously, you have to pick the right thing. It's got to be all about the material. Like, but I think she could have done really well in Twister. I think she could have pulled off that character really well.
Yeah.
Um, I think she could have pulled off Joe very well. I but at the same time, I mean, yeah, you this is one of those movies that low-key really makes you understand why Meryl Streep is truly one of the greats to ever do it. And it's because of her commitment to this film, to the physical part of it, while also just showing those chops. Because, I mean, she's got moments where she's got to be very vulnerable. She's got to display emotion in here. And I love the moments that her and Stray Theron have along the river, where they start to see that that they kind of remember, oh yeah, this is why I fell in love with this person in the first place. And then they also have moments where, for the first time in probably a long time, they have to be co-parents together. They have to make decisions together for the first time in a while. And the way that she navigates all of these aspects of this character without losing the fact that this character can take care of herself, but she also recognizes that she does need people around her in order to do that at times,
Mhm.
is really, really smart and really well played.
And I think that's what you were saying, basically, even with a remake. If you didn't have the quality of the cast, which we
Yeah.
have here, I don't know that this, first blush simple story would really hold together and have such nuance as much as it did. What we have here is a phenomenal cast who could bring shading and nuance and depth to characters who could so easily be comic book cookie cutter kind of characters. And they bring this development of these roles so that you have that nuance of Streep and Strayhorn's relationship, or even Bacon with the son, you know, making that bond and how that even worked and how they made
Yeah.
that connection. So you have this incredible cast that I don't think in context of that would work as well, if at all, which is what you were saying,
Mhm.
even with the remake, they need that, you can't put that lightning in a bottle again when you have something as quality as this, because you
Yeah.
have these phenomenal people, which, Streep in her wisdom and her talent is able to attract these people to work with her throughout her career because of her level of commitment. I mean, people always
Mhm.
talk about her commitment to language, how she could speak so many different languages and different roles that she's played. Here we have a commitment to physicalness, to physical exertion.
Mhm.
And wow, she just brings her A game to that too. So yes, it absolutely shows her as being one of the best to ever do it, because there's nothing Meryl, once she puts her mind to it, it seems, can't do.
Yeah.
She can do it. And she shows it on screen. It's just wow. And I do think that you're right. I think it really just deserves to be remembered better than River Wild, not just because of context of what she can do, but
Yeah.
because it really does become a trailblazer film for what comes afterwards as far as strong
Mhm.
women roles in adventure films.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I know we both have. I think it's funny because of the fact that I think we first started talking about this movie back last year when we started to talk about like female action adventure characters and stuff like that. And obviously, one of the most famous ones was a decade earlier with Joan Wilder in *Romancing the Stone*.
Mhm.
And, that was one that my mom took me to because of the fact that it was just, she loved that movie and she still loves that movie. And again, it goes back to strong female characters and strong female characters that come from a different perspective of, this isn't Sarah Connor in
Right,
T2 or Ripley in Aliens,
right, right.
where it's like by that point you expect this character to be a badass.
Yeah.
Like, she is coming from real life and this story is challenging her. And that's what's so interesting about this character. And but at the same time, from the physical standpoint, it's like Gail doesn't feel challenged to a certain extent because she knows she can handle this, or
Mhm.
she hopes she can handle this again. But no, I've always really loved this one. And of course, there is another main character of the movie that we have not talked about yet. That's the dog.
I was wondering if you bring him up.
How they trained this dog to stay in the raft the way they did
Yes.
is amazing.
I'm glad you brought him up because I was going to mention him. What's remarkable about the dog is that, first of all, I'm one of those people who first look up a film if there's an animal in it and make sure they survive, or otherwise I won't watch the film. So
Yes.
I'm one of those people. So, all through the film, I'm like cringing, like, Meryl, you don't have a flotation device on your dog. What's going on here? But the dog is remarkable because not only does he stay in the raft, but he actually makes that leap with Strayhorn into the
Yeah.
river and follows him. And I'm thinking, well, how do you make a dog leap off a rock necessarily? That's not necessarily something a dog would really want to do either, unless there was a phenomenal amount of treats on the other side. He
Oh,
promised them, I'm not quite
absolutely.
sure. So the dog was remarkable. The dog was remarkable, and incredible performance by the dog. One of my favorite parts of the film, because I'm always rooting
Yeah.
for the animal anyway.
Well, no, and I mean, and ultimately that jump is probably one of the most unrealistic parts of the movie, but it's something that again I really like about the screenplay, which is the fact that it uses foreshadowing and callbacks very well.
Mhm.
Like, you know, the fact that Gail's father had long predicted, you know, the racetrack being robbed.
Yeah.
And then Maggie, the dog, not following Tom. And then all of a sudden she has
Exactly,
to.
exactly. Yes, that's what I
And
love too.
so it's self-preservation, it's survival.
Right.
And no, I mean I just love the way this screenplay is structured. It's just really it's such it's such a good structure. And then you have the camera that Benjamin Bratt's character finds that,
Mhm.
oh well, it's like, we thought it was gonna be help them save the day and all that stuff. But no, it's such a fun movie.
And I think that,
I
what
genuinely
you're
enjoy
saying,
this.
is even with the structure, I think in another hands of another director, those beats wouldn't have been hit as hard or as
Yeah,
well,
yeah.
because it's one thing to have the structure, but if you don't hit that beat of the discovery of the camera, etc., or the dog's evolving relationship with Tom, I mean, it could come off as camp, it could come off as muted and not as strong. You wouldn't have as much tension building. But this seemingly easy to construct and follow script actually has some real meat to it in the right
Hmm.
hands. And right here, we see that it's in the right hands because between the cast and the director, we see it evolving in a meaningful way where it could come off as just kind of shallow or even more unbelievable or campy.
Well, and the thing is, it's like, and I mean, the dynamic between Maggie and Tom, I mean, you can almost read it as, well, Tom is showing he's more self-sufficient. He's more than capable of being valuable in this situation, as the fact that he survives, the fact that he's figuring out ways in which he can help his family. So Maggie instinctually is going to respond to that. But as far as like Curtis Hanson is somebody who even with like LA Confidential with Wonder Boys, I think got really underrated. And I mean, you look at LA Confidential, I mean, that movie's screenplay is layered and complex, and again has a lot of callbacks that come back to be fundamental parts of the ending, that if you don't, to your point, if you don't hit that beat just right, it's not going to work.
Exactly.
And he hits them so well, and he understands the way the audience should be responding to
Absolutely.
those. And I think that's
Absolutely.
the other thing.
Absolutely.
So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, this film should be remembered. And Streep obviously is still on her winning streak. I'm gonna be rooting for her for the Emmys this year. Hopefully she picks up yet another award. But yeah, she's remarkable. This film is worthy of being remembered. And yeah, I think that it should be revisited as the right way to make a thriller. The way to build up
Yeah.
tension, to give the audience something to hook on to and engage them, and there's something to be said for this, what I guess I refer to as the slow burn, the buildup of
Mhm.
tension, and have the audience really rooting for people as opposed to just pulling the punches so fast, and you see things coming a mile away, and it's not, I mean, sure, it's fun, but there's something to be said for something that really engages you and builds up tension in you and makes you want to guess, what are they going to do next? That's the nature of a
Yeah,
thriller. It
exactly.
should be doing that. It should be doing that.
Mhm.
So anyway, we're going to have to wrap it up, but thank you, Brian. Brian, one more time, where can we find Sonic Cinema, and where can we find you when you're not being being pecked at by me to write for In Their Own League?
So Sonic Cinema is simple, www.sonic-cinema.com. Again, movie review, written reviews, podcasts, commentaries, some of my original music, as well as links to Bandcamp, links to a lot of the other main places you can find the podcast or my music in general. Online, I'm still on Twitter nominally, at SKUTLELEMUR. I'm not on there as much as I used to be. I am more on Threads at BM Scuttle, and you can find me at Instagram at the same handle. Um, but no, I mean, I've got a presence, I think, on most of the social medias at this point. Um, some I engage with more than others, but no,
Absolutely.
it's
Don't we all?
always, no,
Don't we
Joan, it
all?
is always a pleasure to talk to you, and definitely have to get you on Sonic Cinema at some point.
Oh,
And then and it's always a pleasure to contribute to In Their Own League. I love what this website is wanting to do, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to be a part of it.
we're grateful to have you, Brian, and thank you once again for Brian wrote our beautiful intro, musical intro. Thank you so much for that again, because I am in love with it. Every time I think I just watch our YouTube channels just to listen to that intro, because oh my goodness. And when Brian first wrote it, I just all my family members heard it first because I was just gushing about how brilliant it was. So thank you, Brian, for being with us today. It's a pleasure always to have you. And we'll be talking about Sonic Cinema sometime soon. That meetup will happen. Absolutely. So thank you, Brian, for being with us. It's a
Yes,
joy.
definitely.
And this was a great discussion. I'm really grateful. Thank you.